There's a type of fat that has nothing to do with looks, and that's the one that actually shortens your life. Most people don't even know it exists because it doesn't behave like normal body fat. It's not just something you see in the mirror or feel when clothes get tight. It sits deep inside your abdomen, wrapped around your organs, quietly interfering with how your body works, long before you feel unhealthy. And that's the scary part. Most people who have it don't even realize it's there. I'm not talking about the soft fat you can grab with your hands. I'm talking about visceral fat, the kind that sits deep inside your abdomen, wrapped around your organs, the kind that doesn't just sit there quietly. It interferes. It pushes inflammation into your system. It messes with blood sugar. It increases cardiovascular risk, and it does all of that long before you feel really overweight. Here's how a lot of people realize something is wrong. Even without knowing the name, they lose weight everywhere. Face looks thinner, arms get smaller, legs lean out, but the belly stays. Or the belly feels hard, stretched, almost pushed outward, not soft. Clothes fit fine everywhere except right in the middle. And no matter how disciplined they are, that deep abdominal fat just refuses to move. That's usually the moment people start thinking they're doing something wrong. But in most cases, that's not the problem at all. That specific type of fat behaves differently. It responds to different signals, and until you understand what those signals are, effort alone won't touch it. And if any of this sounds familiar, this video matters to you more than you think. Because visceral fat doesn't go away by accident. It only disappears when the body is forced to change how it handles energy. And that's exactly what we're going to break down. Visceral fat reacts to internal signals, not just calories. It pays attention to what your body thinks is happening, not what you're trying to do. That's why someone can be disciplined, consistent, and still watch that deep belly fat stay exactly where it is. Internally, the body is holding on to its most dangerous reserve. And the longer that reserve stays active, the more damage it does quietly in the background. Blood sugar regulation gets worse. Inflammation stays elevated, energy drops, and over time, the body becomes harder to change. If this fat doesn't respond early, it usually gets harder later. Here's the part most people never hear, and the reason this fat feels impossible to deal with. Deep inside your body, there is one signal that decides whether stored energy gets released or stays locked away. And when it comes to visceral fat, that signal matters more than effort, discipline, or calories. That signal is insulin. And this is where most people completely misunderstand what's happening. Insulin isn't just about sugar or diabetes. It's the signal that tells your body whether energy should be stored or released. And visceral fat is extremely sensitive to that signal. When insulin stays elevated, the body simply does not open access to stored fat, especially the deep fat around your organs. It doesn't matter how disciplined you are, how hard you train, or how much you cut calories. As long as insulin keeps spiking or never truly comes down, that fat stays locked. That's why some people can diet for months, lose weight in visible places, and still see no real change in the center of the body. It's not that fat loss isn't happening, it's happening everywhere else first. Visceral fat is protected, and insulin is one of the main reasons why. And here's the dangerous part. This doesn't require overeating or extreme habits. Frequent eating, constant snacking, high glycemic foods are enough to keep insulin elevated all day. From the body's perspective, there is no reason to release emergency reserves, so it doesn't. That's the first lock. And if that lock stays in place, nothing else works the way it should. And it gets even worse, because insulin rarely acts alone. There's another thing that quietly sabotages everything you're trying to do, even when your diet looks right on paper. Most people live with it, elevated every single day without realizing it. That is cortisol. Cortisol was designed to keep you alive in emergencies. The problem is that modern life turns emergencies into a constant background noise. Deadlines, pressure, lack of sleep, constant stimulation. The body doesn't know the difference. It reacts the same way. Cortisol goes up, glucose gets released into the bloodstream, and insulin is forced to respond. When this happens over and over, insulin stops working the way it should. The body becomes worse at handling energy. And visceral fat is where that excess energy gets pushed. The body is following a survival pattern that never shuts off. That's why people can lower calories, clean up their food, and still feel stuck. Cortisol keeps interfering with the signal insulin is supposed to send, and as long as that interference stays active, the body keeps choosing storage over release. But even when that interference starts to calm down, something still doesn't fully add up. Insulin can improve, cortisol can come down, and yet, for many people, visceral fat still doesn't go away the way they expect, because there's a third piece to this puzzle. And without it, Even fixing insulin and cortisol doesn't fully change what happens to visceral fat. The body still has nowhere to send that energy. Muscle is what creates demand. It's the tissue that constantly pulls fuel out of the bloodstream. Without enough muscle, releasing energy doesn't make sense for the body. There's no clear destination for it. So storage remains the safer option. This is why people can diet, walk, even reduce stress, and still see little to no change in visceral fat. The system is quieter, but there's no real pull. Aerobic work alone isn't enough to create a strong pull. It burns energy in the moment, but it doesn't change the body's long-term demand. When muscle mass is low, the body becomes conservative. It prefers to hold on to deep reserves. When muscle mass goes up, the opposite happens. Energy finally has a place to go, and visceral fat starts losing its protected status. That's the piece most plans ignore, and without it, the loop never fully breaks. This is also why losing weight without building muscle often backfires. The scale goes down, but the body ends up smaller and weaker, not always healthier. Energy demand drops even further, and the system becomes even more conservative over time. For people who gain weight quickly, this matters even more. Those bodies usually build muscle more quickly too, and muscle burns energy just by existing. The more of it you carry, the more pressure there is to keep energy moving instead of storing it. Without that demand, the body has no reason to let go of visceral fat. With it, everything starts shifting in the right direction. So what does it actually mean to force your body to burn visceral fat? Visceral fat only exists because the body believes holding it is necessary. So forcing it means removing every excuse the body has to keep it. Insulin can't be elevated all day, cortisol can't keep interfering, and energy can't be left with nowhere to go, so you need muscle. When insulin drops for long enough, cortisol stops hijacking the system and muscle creates real demand. Stored energy becomes a liability instead of protection. So storing fat stops being the default. Here's what forcing it actually looks like in practice. First, insulin has to come down, and that starts with sugar and the type of carbs you eat. Constant sugar hits, refined carbs, and high glycemic foods keep insulin elevated all day. That shuts fat release down. Low glycemic carbs, protein in every meal, and real gaps between meals give insulin time to drop. Without that, visceral fat stays locked. Second, cortisol has to stop being triggered non-stop. And that's not just about exercise. Poor sleep, too much caffeine, constant stress, late nights, and living in a constant state of alert keep cortisol elevated even if your diet looks clean. You don't fix that by pushing harder. You fix it by removing unnecessary stress and using movement that doesn't spike the stress response, like walking. And third, muscle becomes mandatory. Muscle uses energy just by existing. Without it, the body has no reason to release deep fat. Resistance training creates demand. And especially for people who easily gain weight, this is not optional. It's the lever that makes everything else work. When these three things are in place, the body stops protecting visceral fat. It has lower insulin, lower stress signals, and a real place to send energy. At this point, holding visceral fat no longer makes sense, so it gets burned. Everything you just heard isn't theory for me. It's exactly what I had to figure out the hard way. At my heaviest, I was over 300 pounds. The turning point for me came from realizing something most people never stop to question. My body was never going to respond the same way everyone else's did. When I finally learned about body types, everything clicked. I wasn't failing at fat loss. I was following plans built for bodies that can easily lose fat. My body wasn't like that. It had a strong tendency to store fat, defend it, and fight back the moment I used the usual approaches. Once I accepted that, the strategy had to change. What works for naturally lean people would never work long-term for someone like me. I needed a different structure, different rules. That's when I started making progress. Not because I found a magic trick, but because I stopped forcing my body into a system it was never built for. That's why I put together my free guide, 7 steps that got me out of obesity. It's built specifically for people who gain weight easily and feel like they're always fighting uphill. It lays out the exact approach I had to use once I stopped copying what works for everyone else. If this video described your situation a little too well, and fat loss has always felt easier for other people than for you, this guide was made for you. The link is in the description. It exists so you don't waste years trying to win a fight using the wrong strategy. It's where I break this down step by step without fluff. The same way I wish someone had explained it to me back then. because this isn't something you deal with later. Visceral fat isn't just stubborn fat, it's metabolically active. It interferes with blood sugar, it keeps inflammation high, it strains your organs, and the longer it stays there, the more it quietly shortens your lifespan. That's why waiting is not an option. The longer visceral fat stays, the more your health is at risk and the harder it becomes to eliminate. By the time symptoms show up, the damage has usually been building for a long time. If you want a clear structure for this, my free guide is in the description.